NASCAR will now return to Mexico City in 2026, but is expected to replace it with Chicagoland, and Josh Williams has parted ways with Kaulig Racing. A lot of uncertainty around the organization. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and our motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2025 Top Rep scheme that we'll see in a couple races in 2025. Truck looks alright in my opinion. I like the look of it. Spencer Boyd's had some really good looking trucks this year. This one's no exception. It looks good. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack later this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2025 Sioux Cup scheme that we'll see this weekend at Iowa Speedway. I like the look of this car in all honesty. I love the simplicity of it, but the sponsorship placement is really good, and good to see Josh Bilicki have a new sponsor. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2025 Menards Workforce scheme that we'll see this weekend at Iowa. I like the different look for this because kind of when you have Menards, you kind of have the yellow look. I like the different look to this car. It actually looks solid. It looks pretty good, and I think it's a nice looking car for the Wood brothers this weekend. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Iowa purse money for this weekend. As every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob for the Cup race, it's $9,797,935, and for the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. This is the first time I believe that the Cup Series had a purse under 11 or even 10 million so far this year. My best guess is because of the situation with 2011 and front row in the charter agreement, among other things around that lawsuit currently at the moment. That's my best guess at this point. Xfinity's kind of normal. I wish the Xfinity series though could have a little bit of an increase in the purse monies. I think that series deserves a little bit of increase on that front, but it's definitely surprising to see that for the first time this year we've got a purse for the Cup Series under $10 million because we've had it over $10 million throughout pretty much every race so far this year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Red Bull. As it was confirmed yesterday that Red Bull will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series race this weekend at Iowa Speedway. This, I believe, will be one of the last 4 or 5 scheduled starts he will have this year with Red Bull, as of course Red Bull was on the car at Sonoma Raceway when he picked up the victory there. And it's been on the car in a couple of the races throughout 2025. This is an interesting track to choose considering I don't know how much Red Bull's affiliated with that area, but I think it's pretty cool that Red Bull continues to be heavily involved with the sport in some way, shape, or form. And I really hope going in next year, if Connor Zollich is expected to move up next year, I really hope we see Red Bull continue to increase that partnership and that sponsorship for the near future. I think it's really interesting to see them back. I think it looks nice. They do a really good job on that front. Good to see Red Bull back in the sport and sponsoring Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Iowa. Really exciting and really great stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Gian Buffalmonte. As it was announced yesterday that Gian Buffalmonte will make his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut next weekend at Watkins Glen. He'll drive the number 22 for the Ram Brothers Racing organization. For those who don't know who Gian Buffalmonte is, I believe he currently drives in the Nitro Motorsports team for the TA2 series. Of course, one of the top teams that does compete in TA2. I think this is a very interesting choice to bring in. I don't know how much experience he has. I think he's one of the younger drivers as part of the TA2 program, but it makes a lot of sense to bring someone in. They've been bringing a lot of guys from that. I think Will Lambros is also supposed to compete with the team next weekend at Watkins Glen, so I think it's an interesting move to bring someone in who does have a lot of that experience at that time. So I really like they're bringing someone in like that. I think he's going to do a solid, hopefully he can do a really good job, but let's be real, the Ram Brothers team and organization has been struggling so far this year, and they were a little bit of under some scrutiny and some beef not too long ago. So we'll see how things end up going for Gian, but I'm not expecting much. I think it might be a tiny bit of a struggle just because the equipment he's in. Hope he can prove me wrong and run well. But like I said, I'm not expecting much from him going into this weekend, or next weekend, I should say, at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As it was announced earlier today that Josh Bilicki will drive the number 66 for Garage 66 this next weekend at Watkins Glen. This will be the second straight race that this team has entered, as of course they will be running this weekend with Joey Gates with the King of the Hill sponsorship, and now Josh Bilicki will be back behind the wheel. He has so far made a couple starts with Garage 66 in 2025, and to be fair, he had a decent run in Chicago not too long ago, and when you think of at road course racers, I actually think Josh Bicki is not a bad road course racer. I've seen him get the best out of equipment from time to time, and I think he's done a solid job in the past, all things considered. So I think that Josh Bicki could be in for a pretty decent run. I think the equipment is solid for the team. I think he's going to do okay with that team. We'll see how he can do and perform. I don't expect it to be a major factor, but I think we'll have a decent chance. Of course, Connor Zilish is going to be driving that weekend. We'll see how Josh Bicki can do with Garage 66 next weekend at Watkins Glen. I think he's going to have some decent speed. We'll see what he can do in that car coming up very, very soon. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fred Vasser. As it was announced earlier today that Fred Vasser has signed a multi-year contract extension with Ferrari through at least the next couple of years. Fred Vasser, of course, is the team principal, has been the team principal for Ferrari for the last couple of years. And while this team has had some victories with Fred Vasser coming on, I think there's been some improvement with the organization. It's been clear as day that this year so far that this team is not as strong as they've been in prior years. Lewis Hamilton was expected to be a championship contender with Ferrari, how they ended the year last year, which they were really strong at the end of last year. And it doesn't feel like they've had that same magic and same mojo in 2025. But I do think with Fred sticking on, they can get better, and I think there is a good chance that they will improve and they will get better throughout the remainder of the year, and I really hope that is the case for Fred and this team, because I want to see Ferrari get back to being the top team like they were when Michael Schumacher drove for the team many years ago. I really hope that improvement can come into the play, because I do think he's a talented individual. He's done some good things with this team for the last couple of years, and we'll see how Fred Vasser can do as he has signed a multi-year extension with the team, and will stick around with the organization for at least the near future and the foreseeable future with the team and organization going forward, at least for the next couple of years and couple seasons with the Ferrari organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kerry Earnhardt. Now, many of you have probably seen this story that's been going around over the last couple of months, but it's been reported that Terresa Earnhardt has been trying to have hearings over the course of the last couple of months to try to sell off part of the land that the Earnhardt family owned to try to build some data centers around the area. A lot of people in the Mooresville, North Carolina area are not very happy about this, including Kerry Earnhardt. He called out Terresa Earnhardt about this, saying that Dale Earnhardt, I think, would be rolling in his grave or would not be very happy about this. And a lot of people basically said he was going to be at these council meetings and calling her out with all the headaches and the heartache that has been associated with this family. Every time I see anything with Terresa Earnhardt, I get angry and I get frustrated because everyone's like, oh, she freed the A not too long ago. The A trademark's not around anymore, so you can't criticize her for it. No, absolutely not. You can 100% criticize her for some of the things that she's been doing and some of the questionable motives and questionable things that we've been doing. And the fact that she wants to build data centers around the area and the land absolutely blows my mind. It's a sacred land. You can't be messing with that stuff. I get that it's been a long time since it happened, but there's no excuse for stuff like this, if you ask me. It's annoying. It's really, really frustrating, and I got to cover this every time, but at the same time, it's annoying. It's really disappointing and really frustrating to hear that this stuff is going on, but it doesn't unfortunately shock me or doesn't surprise me that this kind of stuff is going on with her, because every time you hear anything around Terresa, you get very angry and you get very frustrated because you want to do things and you want to get mad at her for this stuff because it's really questionable stuff that she is doing over there at that plantation area, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Marcus Ericsson. As it was reported by Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com yesterday that Marcus Ericsson is expected to return to Andretti Global in 2026. Currently, at the moment, Marcus Ericsson is in a contract year with the Andretti Global team and organization, and with how good Dennis Hauger has been doing over at Andretti Global in Indy NXT this year, how dominant he has been, and will very likely win the Indy NXT championship here very, very soon. A lot of people have been speculating that Marcus Ericsson could be on the way out, and Dennis might be coming in. A big reason for that is because of how, unfortunately, this season has gone for Marcus Ericsson. There's not been a lot of limelights, and there's been a lot of lowlights this year for Marcus. Granted, he did finish originally in the top 5 in the Indy 500 this year, but unfortunately, he did get a penalty a couple days after the Indy 500 had concluded and was relegated to the end of the field. He wasn't disqualified, but was relegated to the end of the field. And I believe so far this year, Marcus has really only had 1 or 2 top 10s throughout 2025. But I think that if he is, in fact, going to return to this team next year, this is going to be the last chance and opportunity for him, because we really need to see him step up to the plate, because I remember how good he was at Chip Ganassi a few years ago, how strong he was as a driver. And I don't feel like that has been how things have been going very well so far for him. I think things hopefully can get better for Marcus. We'll see if things can improve for him, but I'm not expecting that improvement to really come into play, unfortunately. We'll see if he is, in fact, going to return. Again, it sounds like he will be back with the program and team next year. We'll have to see if that does end up happening. We'll see if he can show some improvement in the 2026 year if he truly is returning to Andretti Global next season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR Creative. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that it was reported that NASCAR is looking for help to steer stock car racing back to its heartland roots from someone in the NASCAR Creative area. Trying to get back to a lot of those fans that have been in those areas where NASCAR, they feel like, has abandoned in the last couple of years. Well, NASCAR, I think, has done a solid job of being able to attract and keep a lot of the newer demographics. I think they've done a decent job in regards to keeping a lot of those old markets. You think about bringing North Wilkesboro back in recent years. Think about bringing Rockingham back, though that's unknown currently at the moment if that's going to be on the schedule for 2026. That being, or for the Xfinity schedule and the Truck Series schedule, I should say. But I think that NASCAR is trying to find a way to stick that balance. And I do get that they want to keep having and trying to multitudes and multitask in different areas. And I do think that it's very important that NASCAR looks at this side of stuff to try to get some of those older fans back. But you've also got to focus on the newer fans as well. Now, don't get me wrong, your traditional fans, I think, are the most important fans you want to look at. But you also want to try to find a way to attract that. So NASCAR is going to have to find a way to strike that balance over the course of the next couple of years, which could be something that'd be very difficult to do at this point. We'll just have to wait and see how they can strike on that balance. I think the playoff format, which we're going to talk about here just a little bit, I think having a certain championship format could really, really help with that. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, so I think it'll be interesting to see how things work out on that front going forward into the not-so-distant future when it comes to stuff like this in the NASCAR Creative side of things in front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stuart Fzen. Now, there's been a lot of updates in regards to Stuart Fzen over the course of the last couple days. And last night, Stuart Fzen's wife, Jessica Fzen, put out a statement in regards to what has been going on. So Stuart Fzen is back in the United States. He's been undergoing surgery currently at the moment. Now, for those who do not know, Stuart Fzen was involved in a very violent and very scary crash. I think one of the worst wrecks I think many of us fans have seen in motorsports across the world. He was racing at a big block event near the end of the event up in Canada, and he had, I think, the right rear tire hit the outside wall where there really wasn't a lot of protection on that front. He basically flipped multiple times. A car caught on fire, ricocheted, and another car, unfortunately, going at full speed, ran in him, and the situation got worse than what it really was. Then, unfortunately, he had a fractured pelvis, and I think he had a fractured right leg, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what was said in the original statement on Monday. They said the surgery has been going well, and they're hoping to they're going to be starting a lot of fundraisers, among other things, and I think some GoFundMes are planning to be coming out on this as well. The most important thing currently at the moment for Stuart Fzen is hoping that he can recover and get back on his feet here in the near future. There's just been a lot of statements and a lot of information coming out. Will we continue to update the story as time goes on? I'm thinking about the Fzen family currently at the moment. I think the racing community in a nutshell is thinking about him at the moment right now, and I really hope for his sake that we can have hopefully a speedy recovery for Stuart Fzen here in the not so distant future. Hopefully that can come here very, very soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Max Verstappen. Now, there was a lot of speculation around Max Verstappen over the course of the last couple of months, whether Max Verstappen was going to stay with Red Bull in 2026 or was going to leave Red Bull at the end of this year and maybe perhaps go to Mercedes or Aston Martin. Well, it was confirmed, and Max Verstappen has confirmed today that he will not be leaving Red Bull at the end of 2026 and will stick around with the program going into next year. He said, everyone can stop the rumors about me leaving Red Bull. I'm not going anywhere, at least for 2026. The speculation was that Max Verstappen was going to leave the team at the end of the year to try to go to another organization, because apparently he had an exit clause in his contract that if he had not performed very, very well and been in certain position in the Saints after a certain period of time, Max could leave the team because of frustrations. But according to what some people said, he's really starting to get along with Laura McKees, and he feels like that partnership, a new engineer coming in and new team principal coming in, he feels like that can help the team move forward into the future. It is clear as day that Red Bull has been a team that's been on a downward spiral over the course of the last couple of years. We all remember how strong that car was in 2022 and also how strong that car was in 2023 and the early portion of 2024. Unfortunately, the second half of 2024 was a complete disaster for the second car, and Sergio lost his ride, which we do expect Sergio to be driving for the Collague program. Maybe Jack Crawford could be involved with that as well. But I think that Max Verstappen absolutely wants to see this team succeed. I don't think he wants to go to another organization. He wants things to work out in his favor so he can stick around long term. The problem is that I worry about this for Max is that let's say this team continues to struggle even with the new team change. I'm just not sure if things are going to get better at this point. I really hope they can get better, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty on that front currently at the moment, and we'll see if things get better. But as of this moment right now, Max has officially confirmed that he will not be leaving Red Bull and will stick around for Red Bull at least for the foreseeable future and at this time. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Biffle. As it was announced yesterday that Greg Biffle is back racing in motorsports, as it was confirmed that Greg Biffle will drive the number 23 for Sigma Racing at Tri-City on August 9th in the ARCA West Series. This will be his second straight year that he has competed in the ARCA West event up in the West, as of course he drove for this organization in those events. This will only be the second time I believe he's competing in NASCAR's top three or the motorsports divisions there. He has, of course, done some stuff with Cletus McFarlane and is working with Cletus McFarlane very closely currently at the moment, helping him get development there. But Greg Biffle, of course, a NASCAR Hall of Famer, I believe was not inducted in this year's class of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. There is a solid chance so he may get inducted in 2026, depending on those who do get inducted. But Greg Biffle competing in this event makes a lot of sense. I do think that Greg Biffle will be very, very competitive. I think last year when he ran this event, I think up in Tri-City, he was super fast and really, really competitive in that event. And I do generally think we'll have a solid chance and opportunity to do very, very well at this point. This is a pretty good organization. They've had Tyler Rafe so far this year, and I think he's done a pretty good job. He's won some races for the team, and they've had some decent pace and decent speed so far in the 2025 season, though I will say this team's also had some struggles at points in the year so far in the ARCA world. But I think he's going to have a solid chance and opportunity. I think this is generally a pretty solid and good car to work with, and I think especially when you're in one of those top level seats, you got to try to do the best you can. They've got a good driver behind the wheel. The equip plus the competition isn't as strong, so we'll see what Greg Biffle can do, but I think Biffle will have a solid chance, and I think he'll have a solid opportunity to do a pretty good job in the event coming up here in about a week or so from now at this point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NBC. As it was confirmed earlier today, the NBC has officially announced their broadcast team for the 2025 year. So here's how things are going to work. In the booth, once again, just like 2024, Lee Diffie, Steve Letarte, and Jeff Burton are going to be in the broadcast booth. This is going to be the same booth that we have had since around the Daytona weekend when Lee Diffie, of course, took over around the Daytona weekend from Rick Allen, who is no longer being a commentator in any of NASCAR's divisions at this point. Of course, Rick has done some stuff with the car store as of late, but Rick Allen, I think, would love to come back and do some stuff in NASCAR in the future. Steve Letarte, who has been working as a crew chief analyst for the side of things of the broadcasting side for NBC since 2015's back, and Jeff Burton will continue on as well. Meanwhile, on pit road, it will be Dave Burns, Kim Kuhn, and once again, Marty Sider, who will be doing the pre- and post-race show, and Dale Jarrett will also be back on the broadcast as well. It's been confirmed that Parker Kligerman, I don't think will be part of it. Parker's been part of the broadcast for NBC for quite some time. And also Kyle Petty, I believe, will not be part of the broadcast this year. Same, I think, with Brad Doherty at this point, as they've downsized their broadcast of them not having as much of a broadcasting size than that as well. I think NBC's got a solid broadcasting team this year. It's not the best we've seen. I think that Rick Allen, I love Lee Diffie being there. I think Lee Diffie is a better commentator than Rick Allen, but I think that you need some other people in there. But I will say, I think keeping things consistent is interesting. I do like that Lee Diffie's back. I think Lee is one of the best lead broadcasters we've seen in quite some time, and I think he'll do a pretty good job being the lead broadcaster going forward, at least for this year. So we'll see how things work out. I like the broadcasting team, though. I think it's solid. It's not the most spectacular, but I think it's a solid broadcasting team for sure. There's definitely some good things about it for sure. I like it. There's some good things about it, and good to see that Lee Diffie's back, and I think the broadcast team will be one to be fun to watch and look forward to going forward into the future. Good to see that the broadcast team has been officially confirmed for NBC. Took quite some time to confirm it, but it's officially been confirmed what it will be for this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. Now, there's been a lot of updates in regards to NASCAR 25 over the course of the last couple of days. First, it was announced yesterday that the truck lineup has been officially unveiled and revealed. Among those drivers will be in NASCAR 25 are all the full-time guys, like your Corey Himes, your Tony Breidingers, your Raja Caruth. You think about other people, like your Brent Cruzes, Brandon Jones, I saw will be part of the game. Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Corey LaJoie is going to be in the game. I did not see Corey Day in the game, which is shocking and surprising considering how well he's ran. You're going to have people like Lane Riggs, Chandler Smith, I believe other people like, I believe Gio Ruggiero is also in the game, I'm pretty sure, and a lot of other really big names, including Frankie Muniz and Cody Dennison as well. The other big thing that's been talked about is the soundtrack, and there's now becoming to be a major focus on what the soundtrack is going to be. Dale Jr. has revealed that Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wallace have played a pretty big role in the soundtrack for this year. You're going to see Breaking Benjamin in the game. I really hope they've got Diary of a Jane. Apparently, Breaking Benjamin had reached out to Dale Jr. about being in the game, which is absolutely a major, major deal. It could be the new song Awaken that they released at the end of last year, but it could also be Diary of Jane. I think you've got to have Diary of Jane. It looks like Flirting with Disaster by Molly Hatchet is going to be in the game. Jelly Roll, from what I saw, will be in the game as well. And Royal Blood, a band that I think is criminally underrated, is going to be in the game as well. I think in general, when you look at some of the things around NASCAR 25, I think there's some really exciting stuff around it, and I do like that they're going to have a cool soundtrack for the game. I do like they're going to have the announcements for the driver lines. I'd expect the Xfinity Cup ones to be revealed in the coming days, and we should be getting more information on that really, really soon. But I think there's just so much around NASCAR 25, a lot of new screenshots have been released, and a lot of new things around the game that have been happening recently. I think there's some good things happening around this game, and a lot of exciting things I think we can all definitely look forward to for sure. We'll see what happens, though, with the remainder of the release of this game, but I do expect more to come out really soon. I'm excited for the trailer, and I'm excited for other parts of the game that will be probably revealed here in the not-so-distant future. We'll see how things go on that front. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox. Now, this story is not just big in the NASCAR world, but it's absolutely a massive deal in the IndyCar world. As it was announced earlier today that Fox has bought 1/3 of IndyCar for around $125 to $135 million. And it was also confirmed as well earlier today they have extended their media rights deal with IndyCar for the long-term and foreseeable future. This is a really big deal because for the first time in a long time, Penske Corporation is going to have someone coming on to really help them when it comes to certain areas. I read the press release earlier today, and some of the things I did notice from the press release, they are looking to upgrade on the digital side of things, which, let's be real and honest, IndyCar has had a major struggle when it comes to digital, when it comes to social media branding. I think that's been a major, major problem. They've also have a big issue with that major gap at the end of the year, and maybe they'll kind of close that gap from the end of August, let's just say, all the way to February and March, where maybe we could have some races going a little bit there, because I think a 6-month gap is not acceptable. There are also some very big concerns, however, because you look at what's been going on with Liberty Media and Formula One. They're under investigation from the U.S. government currently at the moment because of their involvement on certain things. And Liberty Media has had a pretty big say on how things go. They were a big part of why Andretti could not originally get in the Formula One. Eventually, the Cadillac would get in when the Andretti name fell off. But Greg Maffei played a major role in some of the decisions that were made in bringing more races to the United States. My big question is, will Fox have a lot of decisions on when races are going to happen? Are there going to be certain aspects of the sport that they're going to be involved in trying to help really grow? Is there going to be any sort of development on certain things? That's going to be a big question that I think that they're going to have to answer at this point. And I think that will come as time goes on. But nonetheless, this is a really, really big deal because you think about Fox and what's been going on with the Fox Corporation right now. There's a lot of uncertainty around IndyCar. And I think that having some outside source, well, kind of outside source considering that they're involved with IndyCar in a pretty big way. I think having some sort of outside source that can come in and try to help your series grow, I think that's something that's going to be very interesting for sure to really kind of follow as time goes on. But this is a really, really big day for IndyCar. I do have some skepticism toward it for sure, but I think there's also some positive things that we can take a look at from this, considering I think that they'll be able to help in some way, shape, or form on getting the sport back maybe in a better position, because I think right now when you look at IndyCar, there's a lot of unknown what's going on with the series and some uncertainty, and there's been a lot of scrutiny toward the series, and I think some of it's justified, maybe not justified, but I think some of the scrutiny has been a little bit justified on that front when it comes to things like this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stuart Fzen. Now, we all know that Stuart Fzen unfortunately was disqualified from the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race for, I believe, being either too high or too low in weight after the Truck Series race had concluded. And this, unfortunately, is unfortunate timing considering what's happened this week. But a team announced on Saturday that they would be appealing the disqualification, as it felt like it was a parts failure and a malfunction, and they felt like it was something that was not in their control, but something that was in NASCAR's control. Well, that appeal was held yesterday, a couple days ago, and unfortunately, the disqualification from Stuart Fzen is going to be standing, and they will not basically be changing a position going forward. This means that Stuart Fzen, instead of originally finishing third in the race behind Corey Day, who had a really strong run at IRP, and Lane Riggs, who picked up a second truck win of the season, Stuart Fzen will remain in the back. Corey Day, I believe, moves up to third or fourth position. Of course, won the regular season championship a couple races early, and a couple other drivers like Raja moved up quite a bit, and Ross Chastain moved back up inside the top 10. Again, they will not, when you have an appeal like this for disqualifications, they usually overhear them very quickly. I was definitely a little surprised to see that Halmer Friesen Racing was originally appealing it in the first place. I get that they're kind of looking at what happened with Parker Kligerman and what happened with a couple other drivers as well on that front, but at the same time, there has to be some sort of limits, and I think that NASCAR has been pretty consistent on that front, and it's the same thing with the parts malfunction, among other things. They don't know if it was a team melding with something, because they were up front, despite the fact they started in the middle of the pack and had to go to the rear of the field. They moved quickly up to the front, and there was definitely some suspicion on that from a lot of people, from what some were saying. They moved up as quick as they did, considering the struggles they've had at points this year. But I got to say, it does make sense why they upheld the disqualification. I think when you look at it, right, it makes way too much sense. You can't be messing with certain parts on the cars. I get this sometimes there are some malfunctions that do come into play, but at the same time, I think NASCAR has been pretty consistent on that front. Unfortunately, there's been some times where they've been under scrutiny for certain things in the sport, among other things. But right now, I think they may have gotten the call right here. And I think that if they didn't find that something was being melded with, they're going to be pretty consistent when it comes to something like that. So Stuart Fzen's disqualification has been upheld. We'll see what happens going forward for the organization. We're not going to be known for sure who will be behind the wheel of that truck going forward. But we'll see what happens here in the not-so-distant future in regards to Stuart Fzen and what's going to happen with this team going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christopher Bell and Zane Smith. Now, we all know that Austin Hill was suspended for the upcoming race at Iowa Speedway. We know Austin Hill will be behind the wheel of the number 21 car this weekend, because Austin Hill right-reared Ericson rolled down the straightaway into a non-safe for barrier area in Indianapolis Motor Speedway with around 10 laps to go when they were battling for fourth position in the race. And there were some people that were saying, especially Austin Hill fans, which I don't know how many there are out there, but there were some people that were saying, okay, so we suspended Austin Hill for getting into Ericson roll. What about the incident between Christopher Bell and Zane Smith? Well, many of us were wondering, was NASCAR going to review it? Well, according to what's been put out there, yes, NASCAR has actually reviewed the incident between Christopher Bell and Zane Smith, and they mentioned this, I believe, on the Hauler Talk as well. They reviewed the incident, and they viewed it as an aggressive but a mistimed move and just a mistake by Christopher Bell. They said it was not intentional whatsoever what he did to Zane Smith, and he didn't mean to get into him. It was just a mistake on his part, a very badly mistimed judgment move there to try to make a move to get back in line. He completely missed that and got into him. Now, it was noted by Ryan Flores for the incident situation, for people saying, oh, Bell probably didn't feel remorse for the incident. Ryan Flores, who was originally a tire changer, I believe, for Ryan Blaney, got moved over to 38 car for Zane Smith as a trade happened for him to get moved over there. And obviously, the 12 teams improved on pit road this year. But Ryan Flores did say that Christopher Bell went over to everybody on the organization, and he actually went up to everybody, not just the pit crew members, not just the crew chief, but even the road crew as well, who will have to work on the car, and he apologized to every single one of them for getting into Zane Smith. He said he didn't mean to do it, and he apologized. And Ryan said he didn't have to do that, but it just shows his character. we have all heard that Christopher Bell from in recent weeks, from what people are saying, is that Christopher Bell has came in the last couple of years, has become that leader of the garage that I think a lot of us have been really looking for in the industry, of that new crop of drivers have come in the last couple of years. And I think that this shows that Christopher Bell is that guy that everyone has been talking about. And I absolutely gained a lot of respect for Bell, because you don't see this a lot of times. You don't see a lot of top level and top tier drivers go to teams after doing something wrong, because what Bell did was not the best move in Christopher Bell's moment in his career. But I think that it's good on Bell to go and apologize for something like this, because you're going to be competing against these guys every single week. And Zane Smith was having one of his best runs he's had so far in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. He was on track to score a top 10 finish and was running in a top 10 quite a bit of this race. But unfortunately, that incident happened, and it took him out of contention to get that finish. And I know Zane was not happy about the incident that happened on the track there. But good on Christopher Bell for going and apologizing to everybody on that team. Because I've said it before, incidents like that, drivers sometimes just forget about it and they don't get angry and upset about it. Sometimes other people in the organization and team get upset about what happened on the racetrack. To me, though, it's good on Christopher Bell to apologize for that, and I think Bell did it unintentionally. Just got in him. It was just an honest and simple mistake. It is what it is. I feel for Bell, because I know some people were angry at him like myself, but at the same token, at the same time, he made a mistake, but he owned up to it, which I respect him for owning up to that mistake. Good on him for doing that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Will Brown. Now, earlier tonight, I did video covering a story on the channel, but we all will be talking about the Josh Williams stuff, and there's a lot of Kaulig racing news to cover. But let's first begin by talking about Will Brown. As was reported by Speed Cafe and multiple other outsources as well, that Will Brown is expected to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut coming up here in just a short little bit. He is expected to drive the number 11 car for Kaulig Racing in about a month or so at Portland, when the Xfinity Series travels to Portland, while the Cup and Truck Series will be headed to Darlington for the Southern 500 weekend. Now, Will Brown has made a couple starts with Kaulig Racing in the last couple of years and made a couple starts in the NASCAR Cup Series. One of those, of course, coming for Kaulig Racing in the number 13 car at the Chicago Street Course earlier this year, where Will Brown did have a pretty decent qualifying inside the top 20, but unfortunately got caught up in the incident with Carson Hocevar, when Carson Hocevar hit the outside wall and caused a massive chain reaction and pileup, where many drivers got collected, including, unfortunately, Will Brown in that incident and crash. Then he ran last year at Sonoma for Richard Childress Racing, had a really strong and really good run with that team, and unfortunately, he had multiple electrical gremlins and electrical issues that came into play, and unfortunately, he got caught up in another incident when everyone started going bowling into turn number 11 at Sonoma last year, when they put up that wall for the first time, and everyone decided to go bowling. He got collected in that wreck. Will Brown, of course, taking over for Josh Williams, who, of course, we know will not be back with Kaulig Racing next for the remainder of this season. I think Will Brown will do a very good job behind the wheels. I think Will Brown is a really good road course racer. And what I love about this is the fact that we are continuing to see more of these drivers from the supercar world and the Australian New Zealand world that are coming over and racing in NASCAR. You think about Jack Perkins. He's going to be racing on the same weekend as well. He's going to be driving the number 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series. He was pretty good at Chicago earlier this year and showed some really strong pace and really good speed. You think about Brock Feeney, who was rumored to be coming over to this team. I know there was talk of him making a couple starts with Kaulig this year. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case currently at the moment, and that's probably off the table at this point with the extension happening. But I do think, and Cam Waters too, and a lot of this because of SVG having a ton of success in NASCAR over the last couple of years. And I think that we are going to see this continue as time progresses and goes on. I think you're going to continue seeing more teams open us up like this. I think you're going to see more movement on that front. And I really think for Will Brown, this is a really good opportunity to drive for a team like Kaulig. I know their Cup program on road courses hasn't been as strong, but their Xfinity program, especially when Shane Van Gisbergen drove for them last year, that program was actually pretty good. So we'll see how things end up going for Will Brown, but I think he's going to have a solid opportunity here. I think he'll show some good pace and good speed at Portland coming up here pretty soon in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Legacy Motor Club. As reported by Bob Pockrass earlier today, that a North Carolina judge has granted Legacy Motor Club a request for a 10-day TRO, preventing Rickwell Racing from closing on a deal to sell team to TJ Pusher. Let's go back to the beginning of this lawsuit. Of course, currently at the moment, Legacy Motor Club is suing not only Rickware Racing, but also TJ Pusher as well. Legacy Motor Club was pushing to buy a third charter for the 2026 season, and Legacy and Rickware were very close to signing that deal for the 2026 year. However, at the last minute around April, that deal had kind of fallen through out of nowhere because Rickware Racing was claiming originally that that deal was for 2027, while that deal was out for 2026, and they changed it on the document. Meanwhile, Legacy Motor Club basically said that that is not true. We agreed to 2026, and you're just waiting back out of the deal currently at the moment. Then, of course, they asked for originally a TRO on that, and they were denied originally by the judge. Then things have progressed as TJ Pusher was looking to purchase Rickware Racing for the 2026 season, but he was going to keep Cody Ware as the driver and Rick Ware as the owner. Now, they were looking to become a three-car team by the 2027 season with getting back one of the RFK Racing charters, which we'll get to them here in just a second. Then the judge basically said, you cannot sell that to Rickware Racing cannot sell those charters or the organization to anybody else because it would be a violation of what is going on with the lawsuit. So Legacy Motor Club very recently added the other team to the partnership on that front. This is a really, really huge deal with the lawsuit currently at the moment because today's decision is major because if Legacy Motor Club, let's say, they win the lawsuit overall against Rick Ware, they will become a three-car team and a three-car organization. It is speculated currently at the moment that if they do get that third charter, Jesse Love will be the driver for that car, at least on a part-time stint. There are rumors that Jimmy Johnson and Jesse Love could split the seat for a third car at the moment, but there's a chance that nothing would change on that front. I think that is going to be certainly interesting, though, if they do get that third charter. But let's say Rickware Racing does, in fact, win the charter. They are able to keep their charters and are able to win the suit. They can become a three-car team by 2027. That lease per lease with RFK and Rickware would continue on going forward, and things would basically kind of remain status quo, except potentially the TJ Pusher team or Rickware team would be the same. But I'm leaning toward currently at the moment Legacy Motor Club winning this lawsuit right now because with all the information coming out, with all the evidence coming out, with them trying to sell the team off to somebody else, to TJ Pusher who was trying to broker the original deal as the first place, I just think this doesn't look really good for Rickware Racing at this point. It's really going to hurt their case in the whole thing, in direction of it right now. I don't like what's going on at the moment for the side of Rick Ware, and I think Rickware Racing side is going to be in a lot of trouble if they try to sell it. If they win the suit, though, I would expect that if people like Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, among others, could be candidates, maybe Haley Deegan as well. Who knows at this point? But nonetheless, we'll see what happens to Legacy Motor Club and the suit going forward. Did more of an in-depth dive on it earlier today. We'll see what happens to Legacy Motor Club throughout the remainder of the lawsuit going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR playoffs. Now, there has been a lot of talk and a lot of discussion surrounding the NASCAR playoffs and the NASCAR playoff format earlier this week. It all began last week when basically Larry McReynolds and Daniel Trotta completely went off on Mark Martin. I believe it was last Monday or last Tuesday. They went after Mark Martin on Sirius XM. Then Chase Elliott came out in support of the full season format that Mark Martin had brought up, and Chase Elliott, among others, like Brad Keselowski and Dale Jr., even Dave Hill, as well among others, are in full support of a full season points format. Jeff Gluck shared some of the stuff on the Teardown most recently. They've had only 2 meetings up to this point. The first meeting that took place during Daytona 500 weekend. The second meeting that took place during Coca-Cola 600 weekend, which I got to ask myself why we only had 2 meetings in the first place when it comes to the NASCAR playoffs. I feel like the NASCAR playoff format is probably the most important thing that NASCAR needs to be focusing on, maybe outside of the next-gen car. I think the playoff format, there needs to be a lot of focus on that currently at the moment. It seems like, according to them, it sounded like there was a really good chance and possibility that the championship format was going to change in some way, shape, or form for the 2026 season. That was until July 12th. As we read through the article, the NBC people, the part of NBC and the TV providers, have a big say when it comes to the championship format. And they basically are expected to meet with NASCAR at some point in August, sometime at some point this month, to meet on what the format is going to be. And a decision, especially with the schedule not too far down the road being released, which we're going to talk about the 2026 schedule here in just a short little bit. they don't really believe that there's going to be major changes to the schedule. They don't want something that's really minor to come into play. They want something major to change. What a lot of people want is a championship in the championship format to be, one, simplified, which I think we all can agree that the current playoff format is way too complicated at this point. I think it should be very, very simple. But number two, the other big thing is legitimacy. One of the biggest issues that this championship format has had is the legitimacy of it. Now, apparently it was noted by Jeff Gluck that there's someone on that panel that's a current driver that absolutely likes the championship format that we have. I think it's pretty obvious who it is. I think we all know it's Joey Logano at this point. So Joey Logano is probably on the panel at this point for the championship format. I believe that that's the two big things they're looking at, is legitimacy, and they're looking at who is the most deserving all year. Because, again, one of the big issues is legitimacy of this championship format. That's been one of the biggest problems because everyone talks about it. We've got a legitimacy problem with the racing product, and we've got a legitimacy problem with the championship format currently at the moment. I believe that we need to change this championship format, and I'm definitely disappointed to hear that they're not going to be changing it most likely for next year. Now, there is a chance it could change, and things can change at the last minute, but from what a lot of people are saying in the industry, they agree with Jeff Gluck. They're not really expecting a major change to the championship format currently at the moment. And again, that's just disappointing because this needs to be a priority. We need to get this going. I get the schedule's important. I get the drivers are important. I get that the lawsuit's probably playing an effect on this currently at the moment, but I think most fans want to see a major change to the championship format. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We need the full season points format back. I think that's the best format that will be able to crown a champion in the sport, and I really hope that's the format that we do get in the future. But if we want to have a compromise, I think the chase format is the best way to go at this point. So we'll see what happens with the championship format, and when that does get updated, it could be 2027, it may be 2026, but I'm leaning toward 2027 at this point. It's disappointing, though, that we're probably going to have to wait a little bit longer for the championship format. We'll see what happens to the championship format, though, going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing once again. Now, we're going to talk about the Josh Williams news here in just a short little bit. But let's first begin by talking about a lot of speculation in regards to Kaulig Racing over the course of the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of chatter and a lot of things that are probably going to change with the Kaulig Racing team going into next year. I will say this. I do not expect that the Cup Series team is going to be making any changes. It's been confirmed that AJ Allmendinger will stay in the 16 car, and despite the fact that I thought maybe there's a chance Daniel Suarez could drive the 10 next year, I don't expect Ty Dillon to leave the team, and considering the fact that Ty Dillon's been a big story this year, I don't blame them for keeping Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon's been having some decent runs so far in 2025. But Chris Rice was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier today and spoke on a ton of the rumors that are going on with the team currently at the moment. Now, he did confirm that there are some big things happening right now, and he did not deny a lot of the rumors currently at the moment. So the big rumor going around with Kaulig Racing at this time, one of the rumors is that Kaulig Racing could be shutting down their NASCAR Xfinity Series program at the end of this year and moving down to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series to go and be part of the Dodge Ram program. While Spire Motorsports will take their place effective immediately and going into next year, and they will basically have the Spire program, as Spire will then have a lineage as they will keep their Truck Series program going into next year, though that program would downsize to a smaller operation going into next season, and of course Kaulig Racing would take their place except they'd be switching manufacturers. Now Chris Rice did confirm that Kaulig Racing in fact will not be shutting down their program at the end of this year, but they did confirm on SiriusXM they may only have 2 cars next year instead of 3. I think Kaulig Racing downsizing their Xfinity operation, especially if they do switch to a Truck Series program, I think that is going to be the best thing that they can do at this point, because Kaulig Racing, we all know right now that their Cup program and their lower series programs have really been struggling. Because you think about Kaulig Racing just even a few years ago at this point, this team was running a lot better and they were running a lot more consistently. When they had AJ Allmendinger behind the wheel, they were competing for championships. They were winning a lot of super speedway races with Justin Haley. And Jeb Burton got a win or two for this program in 2021. There's just been that major inconsistency, though, and their driver lineup just has not been as strong in the last couple of years. They had Daniel Hemrick in the program, and Hemrick showed some good speed. They've had other drivers behind the wheel, And even you look at Josh Williams, who struggled early in the season. This team just doesn't seem to have their footing right now. They had Shane Van Gisbergen last year, who was really, really strong on the road courses and has some decent runs on ovals. But really, there aren't a lot of guys at that program currently at the moment. I think downsizing the program, especially since they're going to have 2 full-time cars and even a potential part-time third entry in the team, I think that's the best thing that they can do at this point. Now, looking at the Dodge Ram rumors, we obviously know that Ram will be in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026, and they're working on trying to figure out what they're going to do for their 2026 lineup at this point. We still do not know what teams exactly are going over there, and Chris Rice did say today on Sirius that he did confirm that they've had conversations with Dodge and Ram of going over there, but there's still a lot of unknowns on that front at this point. I do think that there is a very solid chance that Kaulig could be that team that switches a Ram. There's a lot of talk that GMS Racing may more than likely be coming back to the Craftsman Truck Series at this point. There's also been rumors and speculation about Rhett Jones Racing, and that could lead to Cletus McFarland coming into the truck program. And we also know that they're likely to bring some sort of gong show into play going into next year, which will kind of determine which drivers will be behind the wheel of the Dodge and Ram program going forward into the future. I am certainly very interested to see how things are going to work out with the Kaulig Racing team, because I do think if you're a Kaulig Racing fan, especially for the lower series side of things, I think there is a lot of uncertainty and unknowns with this program right now, because anything could happen at this point. This feels very similar to Stuart Haas Racing. We didn't really know what was going on with the Stuart Haas Racing team last year until literally going into June, when it was confirmed they'd be shutting down. I don't see Kaulig Racing shutting everything down at this point. I still expect them to be around in the Cup Series. I think they'll still have an Xfinity program potentially next year, just maybe a little more downsized at this point and downwritten. And maybe we'll see like Spire come in and take over, bring maybe Ekes Die, and maybe Roger Kroof could be potential candidates for the seats if Spire moves up. Who knows at this point right now, but I think it's clear as day there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns going on with the Kaulig Racing team and organization currently at the moment. It'll be very interesting to see what happens when it comes to the Kaulig Racing team going forward into the not so distant future. We'll see how things go for Kaulig Racing here very, very soon. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Williams. Now, I talked a little bit about Kaulig Racing, a lot of stuff going around them, and I think there's a big story surrounding Josh Williams, as we did a video covering the story on the channel yesterday, but it was announced and confirmed yesterday early afternoon that Josh Williams has effectively parted ways with Kaulig Racing effective immediately and will now be back behind the wheel of the number 11 car for the remainder of 2025. It was confirmed yesterday that Carson Osmar will drive the number 11 car for this weekend at Iowa Speedway, and we talked about it earlier, but Will Brown is expected to drive the number 11 car for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Portland coming up in the next couple of weeks. Josh Williams has driven the number 11 car for the last year and a half, for the last 40 or 50 races behind the wheel. And you take a look at his statistics, one of the reasons why they left, and I kind of talked about this on SiriusXM earlier today, but Josh Williams and Kaulig just have not been clicking. I think Josh Williams is a fan favorite for a lot of people. We all remember what happened at Atlanta Motor Speedway, also known as Echo Park Speedway, a couple years ago. He parked it on the front straightaway and picked up some sponsorship from that. He took over the 11 car from Daniel Hemrick, who of course moved up to the Cup Series to drive the number 31 car. And I think especially after how well he ran with DGM Racing the last couple years, I think many of us really expected he was going to do a lot better in that car and run better. And I do get that Kaulig Racing this year and the last couple years, they've been on the downhill and they've been on the decline when it comes to performance. Unfortunately, Josh Williams and the 11 team and Kaulig in general, they just weren't working out, and it just wasn't clicking. The performance just was not there. They weren't running very, very well. There was a lot of major inconsistencies with this team. Josh Williams last year had no wins, no top 5s, and 4 top 10s. And Shane Van Gisbergen, who is a road course guy, outperformed him at almost every single race. His average finish was 22nd, which, keep in mind, there's only 38 cars that make the field every week, so that's not a good number. So far this year, he is targeting to even have worse numbers than he had last year, as he has had a win. He's had no top 5s and 2 top 10s. His average finish, to be fair, is a little bit better, and he's been running more races at the finish at this point, percentage-wise, than he ran last year. The problem is that Josh Williams just, again, has not been performing. And unfortunately, in this business, it's a performance-based sport. Now, for Josh Williams, I really hope that Josh does find a seat and gets to continue racing in this sport, because I think Josh does have talent. Again, there's some drivers that just things don't work and they don't click out. Sometimes like crew chief pairings, for example, and driver pairings that just don't work out in their favor. And I think especially when you have guys coming in to take over these seats, potentially we'll talk about here in just a second, and they're bringing sponsorship funding to the table, and Josh isn't one bringing the most sponsorship funding to the table, but number two just isn't performing in the series that are really needing to be performed, things can change very, very quickly on that front. Now, speaking of which, they mentioned this as well. There will be multiple drivers behind the wheel. I mentioned a second ago, Carson Hocevar will drive the number 11 car this weekend. It was all, I would again expect Will Brown to be on the wheel of the number 11 machine, which I think that's going to be a good driver who I think could absolutely win that race at Portland. I would think there's going to probably be some people that are part of the ECR RCR camp that are going to come in. I would not be shocked if you see Daniel Suarez, considering the Trackhouse and them had a partnership. Maybe Suarez gets behind the wheel, considering that we know that Suarez will not be back with Trackhouse racing next year. I think that is certainly a possibility at the moment. I think that both Dillon brothers might get behind the wheel, and I could also see Kyle Busch behind the wheel, considering Kyle Busch did make a couple starts with Kaulig Racing a couple years ago, back in 2023. I do think that is absolutely a major, major possibility at this point. I really hope Josh Williams, though, is able to find a seat and find a ride going into next year. I think he's earned the chance and opportunity to get another year to race in the seats and race in the sport. I could see him going back to DGM Racing, running a few select races to close out the year, and maybe a big team can make a move, considering we've heard rumors about Big Machine Racing. I know his name got brought up for Big Machine Racing not too long ago, and I know Nick Sanchez is linked to the 2 car right now, considering Jesse Love maybe in the Cup Series with Legacy. All that could change if Legacy doesn't get that third charter that they might be looking to get at this point. Who knows? But I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the Collague Racing team and where they go at this point on what drivers they're going to have. But again, it's known at this point that Josh Williams won't be back with the team. It's unfortunate, but it's also, and it's disappointing for Josh because, again, I wanted to see the guy do really, really well. But at the same token and same time, I don't know where he ends up going forward. I don't know where he ends up driving going forward. We'll see if Josh Williams can find a good seat going through the remainder of the year. We'll see how things work out, and we'll see if Josh can run really, really well with an organization. But I think that's kind of unknown currently at the moment what Josh will be doing for the remainder of the year and for the remainder of the season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mexico City and Chicagoland. Now, we talked about the story a little bit on the channel yesterday, but it was announced and confirmed and reported by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic that Mexico City is not expected to be on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2026. But it looks like, according to Jordan Bianchi, that Chicagoland Speedway is expected to replace it and return to the schedule in 2026 for the first time since 2019 when the Cup Series last raced there, along with the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series. Now, it was noted by Pete Pistone as well that from what he is hearing, it sounds like it's going to be around that July 3rd to 5th weekend, which means it will be a replacement for the 4th of July weekend like Chicago was, but it will be replacing for Mexico as well. So replacing in 2 ways to 1 quintessentially. Now, Dale Jr. does know that there probably is going to be more announced in the future around the schedule, and we'll get to that speculation here in just a little bit. But we're mainly going to focus on Mexico City and Chicagoland. Obviously, there's been rumors, speculation around both these dates, whether these dates were going to come back or not return for 2026. Let's begin by talking about Mexico City. So what are the big reasons why Mexico City is not returning in 2026? Well, there are 2 or 3 major reasons. Number one, and the biggest one, is the World Cup. They were trying to have the date kind of scheduled around that point of the schedule for 2026, and logistically, that was not going to work. Now, they were talking about moving the Mexico City date up to the spring portion of the schedule. Dale Jr. has suggested that, I believe, with the San Diego date kind of moving around into that normal area of where the schedule was going to be for Mexico City, and because they were looking to move it to the spring, and it just wasn't going to work out at that point. The second reason Mexico City wants to focus, once again, a lot more on Formula One currently at the moment. But the third big reason is IndyCar. IndyCar is currently pushing for a date at Mexico City at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez track in 2026. And it sounds very likely, according to what a lot of people are saying, that IndyCar is very close to announcing that, and that's why they will be going back there and not NASCAR 2026. Now, they are leaving the door open to return in 2027, so that is certainly a possibility. But it's unknown at this point if there is going to be an international date going into next year. Look, I'll be real and honest. I was a pretty big fan of the Mexico City date. I get a lot of people in the industry weren't the biggest fan of the race itself, but I actually was a pretty big fan of the Mexico City date. I think Mexico City absolutely deserves to be on the NASCAR schedule, and it's a shame it won't be coming back. But when you look at logistics, when you look at other things as well that have been going on with NASCAR currently at the moment and how the industry kind of reacted to it, I think a lot of fans were kind of feeling that this track did not deserve to be fully on the schedule. Plus, you're likely not going to have Daniel Suarez in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. He's rumored to be going to Junior Motorsports next year in the Cup in Xfinity Series. Currently at the moment right now, I think that's playing a major role and a major factor at this moment and currently at this time. So again, going back to replacement, that of course is Chicagoland Speedway. While nothing's been formally announced at this point, Chicagoland Speedway is expected to be joining the NASCAR Cup Series schedule once again in 2026. I mentioned a second ago, the last time Chicagoland was on the NASCAR schedule was only back in the year 2019. When we saw a really good battle between Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson for the win and victory. And then, of course, the prior year in 2018, we all know it as one of the most iconic clips of the last 10 to 15 years. That is the slide job moment against Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch for the overall win and victory in that event. And Dale Jr.'s iconic call known as slide job, one of the best races of all time. We've seen some great moments at Chicagoland, and there's a lot that's going to need to be done to Chicagoland Speedway to get the track up and running, but from what they're saying, and I believe Jordan Bianchi reported this, it sounds like $4 million is what is going to be needed to get the track up to speed and to keep the ground running and get back out there. I do believe they've got the money to do that, and I don't think that's going to be a major problem considering they spent $50 to $60 million on Chicago, and they're spending a lot of money on the San Diego race and the championship race at Homestead as well. $4 million really isn't going to be much, and I know Jarrett's mentioned this on his channel, but there's been a lot of people from what he is saying that are going into the racetrack in and out currently at the moment, and have been updating the scoring pile along among other things as well, and they've been working to get the track up to speed and running. And recently, from what some people said, they've gotten the certain parts of the track ready to go at this point. I am a big fan of Chicagoland. I think a lot of people say it this well, and I'm going to say the same thing as well. If you want Chicagoland Speedway to stick around on the schedule long term, you need to show up. We need to see as many people out to the racetrack as possible so people know and understand, hey, we want to keep this track on the schedule long term, and we don't want to leave this track anytime and into the not so distant future. We want to see this track back on. Now, obviously, there is talk about down the road maybe a repave going on at Chicago Speedway, and I don't really want that to be the case at this point, but that could absolutely 100% be a possibility that there could be a repave coming in the future. I don't want that to happen for 2026. I want to at least see one race on the normal pavement they got currently at the moment. I get the pavement's going to be old, but I don't want to see them go away from that pavement at this particular moment in point. So what's the other big stuff around the schedule? Well, Dale Jr. is suggesting that there's another big thing that may be coming with the 2026 schedule, something major. Some, like myself, think it could have something to do with the Charlotte Roval, and I think that absolutely is a major possibility that the Roval may go away and go back to the Oval. I know Jordan Bianchi has suggested, though, that they're looking to still return to the Roval next year, so I'm not entirely sure if that is what's going on currently at the moment right now, but I think the Roval going away, going back to the Oval, would certainly be interesting, which would mean we'd be down from 6 road course races down to 4. Some have suggested we could be going to Canada next year. I remember there was a report early in the year that NASCAR was looking to bring the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series to Canada next year and go to Montreal, and then 2027 go for the Cup Series of Montreal. It could absolutely be a possibility at this point. One thing that I've been thinking about is also North Wilkesboro. I know Jordan Bianchi's indicated they're likely going back to North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race. I think that there's a chance that could change, and North Wilkesboro maybe takes over the day for Bristol at this point, which I will be real. I like the spring Bristol date, but let's be real and honest, the weather's a major factor, and I think the racing in North Wilkesboro, at least with the next-gen car, has been a lot better with the next gen than it has been at Bristol. The racing at Bristol just hasn't been good, and it's not been that far to watch overall, in my opinion, at this point, so I'd rather have that. But going back to that, the stuff in Mexico City and Chicagoland, I am very excited to see Chicagoland back on the schedule. I think Chicagoland absolutely has earned the right and deserves to be on the schedule, at least for the long-term and foreseeable future right now. But there is also talk about the Chicago Street Course down the road coming back, and I think that's also a major possibility at this point that we could see, but because there's talk maybe they could coexist and have 2 races at the same time. I don't think that's fully possible at this point, but I don't think anything's off the table. So, again, it sounds very likely that NASCAR will not be back in Mexico City, and Chicagoland's coming on the schedule. We'll see what happens with the remainder of the schedule and the release at this point, as I think more information about that's going to be coming out in the future. And again, I think there's a very good chance that we will see Mexico City gone and Chicagoland won't be on the schedule. I'm excited about that as a fan of Chicagoland, that it will be coming back next year more than likely. And we'll wait for the rest of the schedule to be revealed, as it is probably coming in the next few weeks. So that is going to be today's Law NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go to below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What thoughts about Chicagoland returning and Mexico City not coming back? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about Josh Williams no longer being with Collague and some of the future rumors around Kaulig racing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We're probably not getting more content dropping today on the channel. Tomorrow we are going to have reactions to the Xfinity Series race and Cup qualifying from Iowa. Then we'll have the review for the Iowa Corn 350 starting line video and maybe a Shane Van Gisbergen video. Then on Monday we'll have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. We got content coming out on people like Haley Deegan, SVG, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bo Wallace, Russia, Sean Christian, Fergie Budas, Connor Zillis, Junior Motorsports, you name it, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Ryan Priest, Brad Keselowski, Clay's Farm, Dodge Ram, you name it, all the good stuff we'll be talking about on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.